Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Paul Harris and I am president of the City Club's Board of Directors. One of the important traditions of the City Club is hosting political debates. In those debates, candidates typically go face-to-face, in person and in depth, and the audience has an opportunity to ask questions. The City Club's strong preference is to have multiple candidates participate in debates and share their positions on important issues. This informs and educates citizens and enhances the quality of our civic dialogue. Today we are pleased to welcome Congresswoman Betty Sutton. We invited both candidates to the debate and offered alternative dates to both campaigns to facilitate a joint appearance. Regrettably, the Ganley campaign declined our invitations. Consistent with City Club tradition, we will provide candidates who are willing to appear before our audience an opportunity to speak and answer questions. With only one candidate present today, we will conduct today's program in a manner similar to our Friday forums, with which you are all hopefully very familiar, with remarks from the candidate followed by questions from the audience. The youngest of 6 children, Betty Sutton was born and raised in Barberton, Ohio. She attended public schools in Barberton and graduated from Kent State University. She then earned her law degree from the University of Akron. After law school, Congresswoman Sutton practiced as a labor attorney representing first responders and other workers in Northeast Ohio. She then entered politics, winning seats on the Barberton City Council, the Summit County Council, and at age 28, the Ohio House of Representatives. In 2006, she was elected to Congress and is currently serving her second term as representative of Ohio's 13th Congressional District, which covers more than 30 communities in parts of Cuyahoga, Lorain, Medina, and Summit counties in Northeast Ohio. Congresswoman Sutton is a member of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, co-chair of the Congressional Task Force on Job Creation, and a member of several different caucuses. Congresswoman Sutton and her husband reside in Copley Township. Congresswoman Sutton, welcome to the City Club of Cleveland.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and good afternoon. I'm Betty Sutton, and I'm extremely honored to be the Congresswoman from Ohio's 13th Congressional District. I want to thank the City Club for inviting me and my opponent, Tom Ganley, to be here this afternoon. It's unfortunate that he chose not to participate. To those in the audience and those who are listening or viewing this as a broadcast, I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today about my candidacy and the work that I have done and that which I would like to continue to do. Now more than ever, we need someone in Washington who understands our struggles and who will fight to improve our communities and to make our life better for families throughout our region. I've fought for hardworking Ohioans throughout my career. For 4 years in Congress and before that as a lawyer representing firefighters and police officers and other workers throughout Northeast Ohio. My life's work has been about creating and protecting jobs here in Ohio, to make sure that our workers and small businesses get a fair shake. For example, last year I sponsored and passed the CARES Act, also known as Cash for Clunkers. But while it was called the CARES Act, it was really about people. It was about the 3 to 5 million people who depend on the auto and related industries for a job to take care of their families. It was about our communities that depend on auto-related jobs to support police, fire, and other services. It was about making a difference during a time when we needed auto sales to pick up and jobs to be shored up. With auto sales in a 40% slump from previous years, thousands of jobs in Northeast Ohio and our communities were at risk. By incentivizing the purchase of new fuel-efficient vehicles, we accomplished multiple goals at the same time. We spurred new car sales, helped consumers, and made environmental gains that will benefit us all. And study after study has determined that the CARS program was a success. The Department of Transportation reported that 60,000 jobs were saved or created through the program. And the Merit's Automotive Research Group determined that the program spurred even more sales than we previously thought without pulling sales forward from the future. Approximately 700,000 vehicles were sold in 30 days, and according to that Merit study, an additional 250,000 vehicles were sold as halo sales when people came into the dealerships because of the program, and even though they didn't qualify, still bought a vehicle. And what did we see? We saw dealerships empty their lots, and we saw manufacturing plants reopen and add shifts. And for the work on the CARS Act, the Ohio Automobile Dealers Association honored me with the Distinguished Service Award, and the U.S. Automotive News named me as an all-star. And while those gestures are appreciated, the real prize was knowing that we successfully kept people working. Last week, I visited Ford's Ohio Assembly Plant in Avon Lake in the 13th Congressional District. I met with the plant manager and with workers and those who work in the supply chain. The plant manager explained that because of Cash for Clunker's positive effect on the industry, the Ohio Assembly Plant, right here in Northeast Ohio, went from 14 unscheduled down weeks last year to announcing last week that they are going to increase production and jobs. And undoubtedly, they will increase jobs throughout the supply chain. And it's very important to note that because 90% of the parts that go into the vehicles at the Avon Lake plant are made in Ohio. So when the plant increases production, there are tremendous positive ripple effects throughout the supply chain. Every manufacturing job has a multiplier effect of 4 additional jobs, and in the automotive industry, it's even greater. We know what happens when our industries shut down. We know families struggle and local small businesses suffer the loss of support because others can't purchase their goods and services. Essential services like police and fire are hit with layoffs. And safety in our communities goes hand in hand with making them good places to do business. Earlier this year, I worked to secure grants to bring back 51 firefighters in the 13th District and worked to expand COPS grants to put needed police officers on the street. Small businesses are also a key player in job creation. And that's why I voted for the Small Business Jobs Bill to expand much-needed lending to millions of small businesses and offer tax incentives to help small businesses grow and hire. And I worked to pass the HIRE Act to provide tax cuts for businesses to hire, which was paid for in part by closing tax loopholes that encourage the outsourcing of jobs. Because we want to make it right here. We want to make real goods with real value right here in Northeast Ohio. Manufacturing is not just a part of our past. It will be part of our future. And I am committed to an agenda that will help to bolster U.S. manufacturing. We can make it here and sell it around the world. To that end, working with others in our congressional delegation, I've secured support for Nortec's job creation through Enhanced Competitiveness Program. We have the ingenuity, expertise, workforce, and I'm fighting to make sure that we have a level playing field. I've long worked for a new model of trade, one that will work. We need to get away from the false argument that you're either for trade or against trade. This isn't about being pro-trade or anti-trade. It's about the rules of trade and making sure that they are fair and that they are enforced. When there are those who refuse to follow the rules of trade by illegally subsidizing their exports or manipulating their currency, we must take a stand, or companies throughout our region will not be able to grow and add jobs. Recently, we passed the Currency Reform for Fair Trade Act. This important bill addresses China's abusive trade practice of undervaluing its currency of up to 40%. If China reforms their currency, 1 million manufacturing jobs could be created in the United States, and our trade deficit could be reduced by $100 billion a year. That's according to the Economic Policy Institute. And according to the Economic Policy Institute, because of China's abusive trade practices, our congressional district has lost at least 5,700 jobs, and Ohio has lost 92,000 jobs. I believe we must enact appropriate policies to stop that loss. Similarly, I fought to enforce our trade rules when the Chinese illegally dumped products into this country. I've testified before the U.S. International Trade Commission on several occasions, and the good news is we've been winning these cases, involving products ranging from tires, which are important to our economy and produced in Akron, to steel pipes produced at the western end of the Congressional District in Lorain. And when we win these cases, the companies in our region are able to rehire and strengthen our communities. And to build sustainable job growth for our area and our citizens, we have to prepare Northeast Ohio for the 21st century economy by promoting investment in research and development of alternative energy and other new technologies and products. I support the permanent extension of the research and development tax credit, because when companies develop research and technologies right here, we will see more jobs for hardworking Ohioans. We have to leverage our strengths in healthcare and manufacturing, utilizing our world-leading healthcare systems and our expertise in materials and polymer steel and other products. And to that end, I've provided support for important initiatives like the Austin Bioinnovation Institute in Akron, which is a unique collaboration between education and health institutions in Northeast Ohio, focused on innovations in bioscience and technologies. I've also worked to secure support for Lorain County Community College's Entrepreneurship Innovation Institute, which provides businesses and individuals with a wide range of training and business support services, and secured resources for jobs being created through the Sensor System Center of Excellence at LCC, which is developing cutting-edge sensor and new circuit board technology. With these initiatives and others like them, we will be creating not just new jobs, but new innovations, new products, and quite possibly entirely new industries. Throughout Northeast Ohio, innovators and entrepreneurs are working on promising new initiatives, from biofuel companies and products that will harness industrial waste heat for energy production, to producing energy-saving fuel cell systems. Our work is not done. There is much left to do, but there is promise before us. Next week at the BASF plant in Elyria, we will be breaking ground on North America's largest lithium-ion battery materials production facility, due in part to a grant that I helped to secure. And we have Case Western Reserve University researchers working on the necessary studies and enhancements to generate electricity from the wind blowing freely across Lake Erie. We have the University of Akron researchers working on fuel cell projects and the commercialization of clean vehicle technologies. We have Tri-C and LCC preparing our workers for jobs in the green energy economy. And I've been pleased to assist these efforts with my work in Congress by developing policies and securing funds to ensure that we will capture the jobs that will be born of these new industries and technologies. And I've been working to ensure that our workforce is prepared. Now, more than ever, Americans need quality, affordable educational opportunities to make our economy stronger and more productive and competitive. This year, we made historic investments in our future by making college affordable for students and families. The Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility Act will help more Americans graduate with less debt. It transforms the federal student loan program to make it more cost-efficient and effective by squeezing out the abusive practices of student lenders, and in doing so, reducing the deficit by $10 billion over the next decade. That is the kind of improved efficiency and effectiveness that I am pushing for, and we should expect of our government. By pushing back against the powerful special interests of the student loan industry, we were able to expand opportunities for more to attain higher education while saving taxpayers money. In addition, I've worked with other members of our delegation to secure funds for several of Magnet and Tri-C's job training programs to assist those looking for careers in advanced manufacturing. As we prepare our students and workforce to compete, sound and reliable infrastructure is also necessary to attract businesses and to keep long-established companies growing. Investments for infrastructure improvements I helped to secure were important in keeping Goodyear's world headquarters in Bridgestone's Technology Center and the thousands of related jobs in Akron. Other investments in infrastructure I worked to secure were also key to creating jobs. A road expansion that provided Sterling Jewelers and First Energy, two very large, important employers in our region, helped us develop the space to create nearly 2,000 jobs. While we work to build a sustainable and growing economy, we must also be ever mindful and work to reduce the deficit. These issues go hand in hand. Government should be efficient and effective. That is always my goal, and we must be ever vigilant in making it so. That's why I supported a return to the pay-as-you-go legislating that helped us turn a deficit into a surplus during the Clinton administration. That's why I voted against pay raises for myself and have come in under budget for my congressional office every year. And the one pay raise that was passed over my objection, I gave to charities. Small items, but we must be vigilant. Those small business bills I mentioned a moment ago, those bills were paid for. And they closed tax loopholes that far too long promoted jobs being shipped overseas. Like many Ohioans, I think most Ohioans, I'm concerned about spending adding to the deficit and do not think it should ever be done so lightly. But when our nation was on the brink, and economists across the spectrum and across the country concluded that action was necessary, I was not afraid to stand up and take necessary action. That's what the Recovery Act was about. It provided middle-class families with tax cuts. It helped our communities keep needed police, firefighters, and teachers on the job. It provided senior citizens and veterans with needed assistance and emergency help, to families suffering the effects of unemployment as they worked to find another job. It enabled worker retraining and put people to work building projects that our communities need. It was not a magic solution, but we know if we had not acted, the situation would have been far more dire. And though far too many are still suffering under the effects of the recession, and our work goes on, manufacturing and hiring has been increasing as we fight our way forward in Northeast Ohio and across the country. So while I, like those economists, thought action was necessary to prevent depression and greater devastation, I also believe that we have an ongoing charge to address our deficit. And that means more than just spewing rhetoric. To that end, I fully support making sure that we have the tax cuts for the middle class, and in fact for every household up to $250,000, while allowing the deep tax breaks for the richest 2% of Americans to expire. We simply can't afford to add $700 billion to the deficit that extending those super tax cuts for the super wealthy would cost us. By allowing the extra tax cuts for the super wealthy to expire, and by bringing our troops home from Iraq next year, we can begin to make strides in restoring our nation's fiscal health. And right here in Northeast Ohio, I'm also helping to lead the fight to reduce a $276 billion annual drain on our tax dollars and our economy caused by the costly problem of corrosion. That's right. I want to take the rust out of the belt, literally. According to a 2001 report to the Federal Highway Administration, the costs of corrosion in the U.S. are $276 billion per year. Adjusted for inflation, this drain on our economy is more like $400 billion a year. $400 billion a year, it's just too high to ignore. Corrosion costs raise prices, reduces the availability of goods and services, and have a negative impact on our ability to fund other critical programs and keep firefighters and police and services running. But corrosion only dominates the headlines when there's a disaster, when we see a bridge fall, when we see water mains burst. But by then it's too late. To prevent future disasters and to lower the costs and our deficit, I've assisted the University of Akron's creation of the first bachelor's degree program in corrosion engineering. I've also worked on policies to incentivize corrosion mitigation and prevention plans at the onset of a project, working together with the Department of Defense, the University of Akron, and companies like Sherwin-Williams, RPM, PPG, BASF, Philpott Rubber, Corpro, and our dedicated workforce. Our region is poised to be a global hub of corrosion prevention technologies and products that will be used to prevent corrosion not only in the United States, but which can be sold around the world, leaving us with the opportunity to capitalize on this emerging industry and the jobs that go with it. The Department of Defense has made investments to reduce corrosion on military assets, and I've helped to get the Department of Defense to partner with the University of Akron to do the research. The return on investments for these projects have yielded a 50-to-1 savings ratio. And that will help us save taxpayers money and reduce the national deficit while we build a new industry and create jobs. Now, I strongly disagree with those who believe that the way that we attack the national deficit is by slashing Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits. I believe that Social Security and Medicare are covenants between the government and America's seniors who have dedicated their lives to building our communities and our nation. It's a commitment we must honor, and I'm honored to have the endorsement of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare for my commitment on these issues. I'm committed to a bipartisan, responsible approach to ensure the long-term stability of Social Security and Medicare, but under no circumstances do I think privatization is the answer for Social Security or Medicare. I'm also committed to ensuring the health, safety, and security of our servicemen and women, both active duty and veterans. When our soldiers were being forced to remain on active duty longer than planned, I stood up for them and introduced legislation and enacted it to provide them with fair compensation for their sacrifice. And I'm proud to have successfully fought to improve VA services, and when our local VA clinic in Lorain was about to move from its accessible location, I worked with local veterans and leaders to make sure that it remained right where it was in a location where they could get to and it was accessible. I've also worked to secure funding for job training and career assistance programs at Tri-C, Magnet, and the Summit County Veterans Service Commission. And for these efforts on behalf of veterans throughout our communities, I was very honored to be named Legislator of the Year by the Ohio AMVETS. Fighting to make life better for everyday Ohioans is who I am, and it's what I'm about. I've always stood up for the middle class when big corporations try to take advantage of them. That's what I did when I took on the credit card companies that prey on our families. And we passed the Credit Card Holders' Bill of Rights to stop credit card companies from imposing arbitrary rate increases, charging hidden fees, and issuing cards to our children, locking them in a cycle of debt. I've never hesitated to stand up for the middle class and those who aspire to it. I co-sponsored legislation to increase regulations on Wall Street banks to prevent another financial meltdown and hold bankers and hedge fund managers that drove our economy to the brink of collapse accountable. I also fought for the middle class when I stood up to the insurance companies that would deny us coverage based on pre-existing conditions, to remove lifetime caps on coverage, and to work to close the donut hole that was forcing seniors to choose between getting their medications and putting food on the table or heat in their house. We are a great nation, and in this great nation, it should not be that way. I've been deeply honored to work on behalf of the people of Ohio's 13th District, to fight on their behalf. And we've made progress, but these are very tough times, and there is yet much to do. But our potential is great. I respectfully ask for your support and your vote to allow me the great privilege to continue to push forward to the potential and to reach for the opportunities that I know together we can realize. Thank you for having me.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a Friday forum featuring Congresswoman Betty Sutton, representative of Ohio's 13th Congressional District, and a candidate for re-election for a third term as representative. We would also like to restate that both candidates were invited to this program and that the Ganley campaign declined our invitation. We will return to our speaker momentarily for the traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speaker now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We remind you that members and guests alike are welcome to attend City Club forums. We hope everyone listening will join the City Club and support our nearly 100-year tradition of civic dialogue. Please visit our website, cityclub.org, to see a full schedule of our upcoming programs. We are pleased to welcome guests today at tables hosted by Muscovitz and Limmerbrock and the United Steelworkers. Thank you for joining us today. Now we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome guests from everyone, or questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Development Director Cheryl Helden and Database Manager Lucille Barbati. First question, please.
Yes, Ms. Sutton, thank you very much for that warm and positive statement. A question that I have we been able to develop any new energy, renewable energy, green jobs in the 13th District or the state? How is that going in currently? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Certainly Ohio has been receiving a great deal of investment in green technologies. And certainly we're making progress both through the initiatives and the work that's being done at Case Western Reserve and out in Lorain County at LCC to generate these potential jobs for the future. There is work being done in the city of Akron. There is an entrepreneur that is capturing waste heat, industrial waste heat, and turning that into energy. And I know they're doing projects with our steel mills, capturing all that heat, that excess heat, and turning that into energy. So there are jobs being created. There is much more potential to be realized. Ohio is viewed as a place where this kind of industry can really take hold and help to lead us into a revitalized economy based on these new and alternative energies and products. I know that in some of the work that I have done on energy, I've worked with local companies, everyone from First Energy, U.S. Steel, some in the traditional energy sectors, Babcock and Wilcox, which is also in the 13th District, heavily in the city of Barberton and Copley, all of whom are looking at the potential to add jobs as we move forward with some of the national energy policy initiatives that are working their way but have not completed their progress through Congress and the Senate.
I have probably a dozen questions I'd like to ask, but I'll try to select one. One of the themes that we're hearing in the awful set of commercials that is our fate this year is about independence. And I wonder if you can tell us about any votes that you've taken that were not with the Democratic Party.
Sure, I appreciate that question. Look, I think independence is important, but I am driven by the needs of my district. And so whatever decision I ever make isn't going to be because it's with the Democratic Party or it's against the Democratic Party, it's with the Republican Party or it's against the Republican Party. It's going to be because I think that in this moment, this is what I need to do to look out for the people who sent me to Congress. I will tell you the bills that I mentioned. I mentioned the CARS Act. The CARS Act, I think this is a good example. The CARS Act was bipartisan from the start. It was my bill. I reached across the aisle. We made it bipartisan. It was born of consensus. Business supported the bill. Labor supported the bill. Environmentalists supported the bill. Half of the Republican delegation of the House in Ohio supported the bill. And there are other bills that I mentioned. The bill related to the troops. Again, a bill that was bipartisan in nature that I sponsored and we passed. I also introduced and passed a bipartisan bill that was rolled into another bill related to food safety to give the FDA the mandatory recall authority. It's now pending in the Senate, but again, reaching across the aisle to make sure that it's not about being a Democrat, it's not about being a Republican, it's about getting things done for the people that I serve. I think one example of independence that is not exactly on the point of voting for legislation, except it sort of is. When Congressman Rangel was the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee and was found to have violated the ethics rules, I said that it was time for him to move aside from that position. That was not something that I waited for anyone to tell me. When the House of Representatives and the Democratic caucus was looking to move the health care legislation under the deem and pass approach we heard about last year, I stood up and said, I don't think that that is appropriate. We shouldn't do it that way. And as you will see, it didn't happen that way. So there are a number, the Josh Miller Hartz Act is another piece of legislation that I sponsored and passed through this Congress. It's a bill that would help us get automated external defibrillators into our schools across this country. It's named after a young man who passed away after a football game in 2001 in Barberton, my hometown. He collapsed after the game, suffering sudden cardiac arrest, and it was too late when the defibrillator got there. We hear these stories, don't we? Almost every year we hear of a child or somebody at schools who have suffered this loss. That bill passed unanimously through the House. The dogfighting bill that I sponsored that was rolled into the Farm Bill, again, it was bipartisan from the start. So things do get done in a bipartisan way. We don't always hear about them. And I'm willing to work with anyone who wants to work for solutions that will work for the people who sent me to Washington. But if they don't, I'm still going to work for those solutions anyway. And if we have to do it, with only one side, then we have to do it because we have to get things done for the people who we represent. So thank you for the question.
Congresswoman Sutton, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You said that you would preserve Social Security and Medicare without privatizing them. This is a really difficult challenge.
It is.
Exactly how would you do that?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and it's a challenge that we have to face. I don't think that privatization is the answer. I think that we saw what the risks associated with privatization would have wrought had the system been privatized during the recession, the deep recession that we just felt. The effects that our seniors would be pursuing or feeling would just be devastating. There are a number of things. I think that one of the things I talked about in terms of saving money and being efficient and effective in government, I'd much rather spend money shoring up Social Security than on corrosion, losing it to corrosion. So I don't think that these issues are, we can't think in the same old ways. You mentioned that it's a tough dilemma. How do we deal with the costs of Social Security? I also don't think, that's another reason why I don't think it's good to continue those super tax cuts for the super wealthy beyond $250,000 because, again, that's $700 billion. Now, that would go a long ways to shoring up Social Security. But I think that at the end of the day, we're going to have to work, again, in a bipartisan way to try and find those solutions. Whether it is the idea that some embrace of raising the amount of, the cap on Social Security, or, again, finding other solutions that will allow us to bolster the system. I'm committed to that. I said that I received the endorsement of the Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, and I look forward to working with them and others of like intent and purpose to get that job done for our seniors. Obviously, all of the information I talked about in terms of jobs and building our workforce and building those opportunities are also part of the solution because we know that part of the problem is, I wouldn't say problem, but part of the challenge is that our workforce is getting older. And there are more people who are going to be taking in than putting out. So these are complicated and complex challenges. We're going to need creative and thoughtful folks at the table seeking real solutions. So I guess, you know, first let's leave the rhetoric behind and see what pieces that I just talked about on the job front, on cutting costs elsewhere, investing in Social Security, we can come up with to make the system solvent for many, many years to come.
Representative Sutton, I want to thank you for your vote on the stimulus bill. And I believe that you also supported TARP and the health insurance bill. And if I'm correct, can you discuss the benefits of this legislation for the American people and why people should be excited about those pieces of legislation?
Well, I don't know if, with respect to the banking bill, if anyone's very excited. But the issue was we were going to have a financial collapse. The economists from across the spectrum said we have to act to prevent this financial collapse, not just because, and frankly, not for the banks, but we have to do it to keep ordinary people from getting crushed. We all know the effects were still very difficult, even with the action, to cushion our main streets and our businesses, and we continue to have to work to improve their plight and their opportunities. But that bill, when it came back from the Senate, the bill that to help the financial sector and avoid crushing the ordinary folks, that bill contained a lot of help for the middle class. It had tax cuts that were added into the bill in the Senate that were important to me when I decided to support that bill. It took care of the AMT that was about to hit a lot of middle class families in that year when they could least afford to handle that. It expanded some tax assistance and credits and cuts for middle class families at the time. So it was important to keep the economic system from collapsing and keeping all of the bad ripple effects that occur from even hitting our communities and our neighbors and folks harder. In terms of the Recovery Act, again, economists across the board said, we've got to act. Government is the player that's in the position to make a difference, to keep us from going off the cliff. And so the Recovery Act, as I mentioned, did a lot of things, including that tax cut for middle class families, emergency assistance for families in need, unemployment compensation for those who were suffering job loss under the weight of the recession. It helped us to keep much needed firefighters and police officers and services running at the state and local level. It kept teachers in the classroom, which I talked a lot about jobs and our future and our potential, and of course the education of our children is critically important, and frankly in tough times perhaps even more so important for our future competitiveness and strength. The projects that were funded through the Recovery Act were also critically important, not just for the near term. Of course, we saw some projects put people back to work, construction, and some of the infrastructure projects. But in the cases that I mentioned, I'll give you an example, the Firestone, Bridgestone Firestone project that's going on in Akron. That project needed infrastructure improvements so that Bridgestone Firestone would maintain its presence and build this center in Akron. A lot of jobs attached to that. And it was with the Recovery Act funding that we were able to make those infrastructure improvements. The BASF factory that I was talking about, which is going to be the largest lithium-ion battery facility in North America, was made possible because of that legislation and a grant that was included. Now, in the near term, as we build that facility, obviously it's going to put people to work. But the real long-term value is it positions us on the cutting edge of this new technology that will be very critical for the next stages of our auto industry, which again, the economy in Ohio is intrinsically linked into. And so it was a bill that is, has effects in the near term, kept us from going deeper into a devastating depression, but also allowed us to start to build a foundation for a revitalization of our economy. And hopefully, and I think it has to be, an economy that is sustainable and built on some of the new technologies that I talked about, and that we have the infrastructure and the talent right here in Northeast Ohio to develop and benefit from. So thank you for asking about those bills. You also asked about the health care bill, I believe. The health care bill, of course, important in many ways. Certainly not a magic solution, but we know that health care costs continue to accelerate in an unbridled fashion. It was important to push back against the insurance industry that was denying people care based on pre-existing conditions. It was important to push back on them for putting on annual caps and denying people coverage, access to care, just when they needed it most because of something they went back and they found in the contract where they didn't, they incidentally didn't answer a question the way that they were supposed to, even though it was unintentional and unrelated and insignificant. Those were called rescissions. That was a horrendous practice engaged in by health insurance industries, and put the curb on the costs of growing health care. The bill, you know, instead of being totally focused, our payment system currently, or prior to the bill, was very, very focused on payment to providers due to the procedure. So if you went to the doctor and you got a test done, the doctor was paid for the test, for doing the test. And then you went to the next doctor because the test said you should go to this doctor. But in order for that doctor to get paid, they do the same test because that's the way the system and the payments were set up. So putting some sense and order into our payment system so that it is more centered on the outcome for the patient and what the patient needs as opposed to just procedures, that will help us to drive down some costs. But much work, continues, and the reality is, and again, squeezing, closing the donut hole so that our seniors can have access to the prescription drugs that they need. And I'll tell you the stories that I have faced and heard from our seniors throughout the time that I've been in Congress about the difficulties that they are experience because of the cost of their medication, and when they hit that donut hole, have just been breathtaking and not in a positive way. I actually carry a card with me here, a gentleman gave me out in Lorain County of all the medicines that he has, just to remind me of how difficult a challenge it was. So the health care bill is a good start. It's not, I think it's, sometimes in government we hear somebody say, we passed the health care bill, we passed the jobs bill, we passed the small business bill. And the reality is, none of these bills are in and of themselves magic answers or magic solutions. And we have to continue to perfect. Make sure that they work as they're intended, that we don't have bad unintended consequences. The responsibility is ongoing. And I think that's true of all the measures that you just mentioned.
Betty, I'm Jack Sharon, a veteran. You mentioned veterans programs. also the past commander of American Legion Post 234 in Brunswick. And my post has done a lot of work with the veterans at Brecksville Hospital and helping some of them go downtown. I've been doing this for quite a few years, and this is not a question, this is a thank you. I have seen a major difference in the funding and the programs that are helping our veterans. And I've seen guys that didn't have a lot of hope before, and there's not enough money there for this and this. And those same people are now out looking for jobs, getting further education. And the real truth was, before your group in Congress started working on these veterans programs, there's a lot of them were underfunded, and people were being turned away for help. So for the veterans that I've been with in the last several years, for American Legion Post 234, thank you.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, but you know, I can work from here to forever, and we'll never be able to do enough to thank our veterans, in my view. I will always strive to do so, and I am so grateful for all that they have done for us. And you know, I'm the daughter of a World War II veteran. He was a tail gunner and a B-29 bomber in the Pacific Theater, and I think of him often. And I think about the sacrifice he made. And he passed away before I was elected to office. So he didn't get to see any of this. But, you know, I think about what a great country it is that his daughter, the youngest of 6, would find her way from this working class family to the United States Congress. And I take the responsibility to look out for our veterans very, very, very seriously. It was a shock to me when I arrived in Congress to find that for all of the talk about supporting our veterans that I had heard while I was an ordinary citizen out here in Northeast Ohio, the truth of the matter is that the VA had never been fully funded in its 77-year history. I don't know about you, but I found that to be a shock and not a good surprise. So in the first year that I was in the Congress, I was on the Budget Committee. And we fought to make sure that for the first time the VA was finally fully funded. And we know that as our veterans increase with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, our responsibilities grow even larger. I last week went to visit, was it last week? I've lost a little track of time. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I went to visit a soldier at Walter Reed. A bright young man who had lost his leg in Afghanistan from Copley, Ohio. And this young man, he had lost his leg, but his spirit was invincible. And he was getting ready to come back, and he was going to go to school, and he's going to get a degree in business, and he's gonna be something great. I am sure of it. And part of the reason why he's going to be able to do that is the GI Bill. The GI Bill for this century, which is so important, so that when our soldiers do return, they have the chance to get that education. We had not improved the GI Bill since its original passage, but we did that in our last term in Congress as well. So those are two things that I'm very proud of, and also the local initiatives that we're working on with job training, both at Tri-C and LCC and elsewhere, and in Summit County. I've also done some work to help with securing funding for homeless veterans, which is, again, something that we need to take care of in this great nation. So it's my privilege to work for our veterans. Thank you.
Congresswoman Sutton, I've been hearing a lot in the media about something that they're calling the enthusiasm gap. And as you travel the 13th District, could you please comment about whether you're finding this in your travels? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. You know, it's clearly it's a difficult economic time. And there are a lot of people who continue to feel the weight of this recession heavily. And I think that there is a tendency for sometimes that to weigh down, obviously, the enthusiasm, and that's understandable. But with respect to the enthusiasm gap for elective office purposes. And I think that that's what you're hearing about out there, is there seems to be a belief that maybe Republican voters are more energized than Democratic voters. I think that people understand the importance of this election and that we're at a critical juncture for the future of our communities and our state and our nation. And at the end of the day, I think that people are going to make a choice between candidates in my race as well as in other races. And they're going to go out and they're going to vote for the person who they believe is going to help to take us to a future that they seek. So I do think it's important that we do everything we can to encourage people to vote, regardless of how they're going to vote. It's how our process works. It's what makes our country, one of the things that makes our country so great. So whatever I can do to encourage the lack of any kind of enthusiasm gap, I'm committed to doing, and encourage people to encourage others to get out there and vote.
Congressman Sutton, can you tell me why the members of the House, the Senate, and the White House are exempted from the health care bill that was just passed recently?
They aren't. Yeah, they aren't. No one is really exempted. I'm not sure I really know what exactly you're referring to. Do you have a specific place? I mean, when the exchange is set up, I look forward to the day that if I'm still in Congress, to have the chance to go to the exchange and seek a plan through the exchange. I hear this, I've heard this before, but I'm not sure what the basis of your question is, the foundation of the question is. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
I have a question on the National Endowment for the Arts. Last week I heard both, you and your opponent speaking separately. It wasn't a debate, but on WCPN's The Sound of Ideas. And he made a statement that he wanted to completely eliminate the National Endowment for the Arts and, in fact, referred to it as smut. And my question for you is what your position is on the National Endowment for the Arts, and also what effect it has on the economy in the 13th Congressional District.
Well, thank you for the question. I think, probably as we speak, there may be some people who will be enjoying this opportunity through some venues that are supported by the National Endowment for the Arts. And I think it's important that people have access to information. And I think that some of the funding programs through the National Endowment of the Arts, and I believe the program that you're referencing, what you heard us on, was actually on the WCPN, which receives some funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. So it's a bit ironic that was the venue in which that comment, I think, was made. Look, I think it's important to continue to invest in the dissemination of what the arts have to offer to our broader community and our public. And I think it's critical not just for quality of life but also, as you point out, in an economic sense as well. We have WCPN and we have WKSU and we have public television, which are all critical components of furthering, as I say, our education about subjects of importance to our citizenship and our citizenry out in our communities. They also are our employers. And, I've heard in recent times, if you don't mind, a little bit of a deviation in the answer to this question, in the sense that I've heard in recent times that people talk about public sector jobs as if they're not really jobs. I know I'm looking at this gentleman because I know he's a firefighter. Well, I don't know about you, but I am glad we have firefighters. And I think that they are real jobs. And so I do think that if I could just take this moment and say that whether it's police officers, and you asked, a gentleman asked about the Recovery Act. One of the reasons why it was so important to support the Recovery Act, because it kept firefighters on the job and expanded grant funding for police. It was supported by the FOP on a national level. We hear a lot of blanket complaints about big pieces of legislation, but when you look down at the details, it's harder to say, really, whether or not, I mean, you ask people, then you would have voted against that funding for police officers. You would have voted against that funding for firefighters. You would have voted against having those teachers in our classrooms. Those are important details about what it was exactly that our actions were about. It was about keeping those folks who make our world turn and strengthen our communities by their work every day on the job to keep us growing stronger and stronger. I think the arts are an important part of the strength of our communities, our state, and our nation.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we have been listening to a Friday Forum featuring Congresswoman Betty Sutton. Thank you very much, Congresswoman Sutton. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.